So we have reached, in a way, the climax of King Aswapati's journey. He has received the vision of the Supreme Divine Mother, and she understands what is his aspiration, his prayer. But she tells him that whatever you've won, whatever you've gained, you have gained for yourself. It's not time for me to give this total transformation that you want for the earth. Earth is not ready. Man is not ready. So she is telling him, this is her expression, or she's making him see the place of man, or the state of development of humankind. And she says that he doesn't know, man doesn't know his own greatness, nor his aim. He doesn't know why he is here, for what, because he has forgotten why he has come and whence, where he has come from. So I'm going to continue from there. His spirit and his members are at war. His heights break off too low to reach the skies. His mass is buried in the animal mire. A strange antinomy is his nature's rule. A riddle of opposites is made his field. Freedom he asks, but needs to live in bonds. He has need of darkness to perceive some light, and need of grief to feel a little bliss. He has need of death to find a greater life. All sides he sees and turns to every call. He has no certain light by which to walk. His life is a blind man's buff, a hide and seek. He seeks himself, and from himself he runs. Meeting himself, he thinks it other than he. Always he builds, but finds no constant ground. Always he journeys, but nowhere arrives. He would guide the world, himself he cannot guide. He would save his soul, his life he cannot save. The light his soul had brought, his mind has lost. All he has learned is soon again in doubt. A sun to him seems the shadow of his thoughts. Then all is shadow again, and nothing true. Unknowing what he does, or whither he tends, he fabricates signs of the real in ignorance. he has hitched his mortal error to truth's star. Wisdom attracts him with her luminous masks, but never has he seen the face behind. A giant ignorance surrounds his law. Assigned to meet the cosmic mystery in the dumb figure of a material world, his passport of entry false and his personage, he is compelled to be what he is not. He obeys the inconscience he had come to rule and sinks in matter to fulfill his soul. Awakened from her lower, driven forms, the Earth Mother gave her forces to his hands, and painfully he guards the heavy trust. His mind is a lost torch-bearer on her roads, illumining breath to think and plasm to feel. He labors with his slow and skeptic brain, helped by the reason's vacillating fires, to make his thought and will a magic door for knowledge to enter the darkness of the world, and love to rule a realm of strife and hate. A mind impotent to reconcile heaven and earth, and tied to matter with 1,000 bonds, he lifts himself to be a conscious God. So it's not a very encouraging picture, is it? I'm sure the encouragement will come at the end, but still there's quite this long discouragement that the mother gives to Aswapati. We'll start this way. Oh, all right, Martin.
His spirit and his members are at war. His height break off too low to reach the skies. His mass is buried in the animal mire. A strange antinomy is his nature's rule.
Oh, this is man who has forgotten why he has come and whence, from where. So this we experience, no? That his spirit, the higher levels of our consciousness, and our members, the parts of our body. Here I think it means your members are your limbs, the parts of your body. So they are at war, they're conflicting. These higher levels that we may reach are too low to reach the skies, to reach the heavens. And his mass, most of our humanity is buried in the animal mire. Mire is mud, dirty mud. And Sri Aurobindo often uses this word for matter. But here he says the animal mire. It means that dirty mud of the lower animal nature, which is driven purely by desire and lower impulses. And then he says, what is ruling the nature of man? A strange antinomy. An antinomy is a contradiction, opposites. So man is ruled by the dualities, by opposites. And that's what comes next. Eve, if you would read.
The riddle of opposites is named is fear. Freedom he asks, but needs to live in bonds. He has need of darkness to piercing some light, and need of grief to feel a little bliss. He has need of death to find a greater life.
Yes. So this is this strange antinomy which rules our human nature. And it's not only that our human nature is ruled by opposites, the field in which we move and live is a riddle, a puzzle of opposites. We long for freedom, but we need to live in bonds. We are not ready yet for freedom. We need to have limits and ties. We need darkness in order to be able to perceive light. We need these contrasts and opposites. We have need of grief to feel a little bliss. If we don't have that opposition, soon we get tired even of being happy, and then we want some drama in our lives, and sure enough, soon it comes. And we even need death, he says. We need that experience of dissolution and starting again. That's a necessary part in our movement towards a greater life. Renana, you would read.
All sides he seen and turns to every pole. He has no
No certain
light by which to walk. His life is like man's doth be hard and sick. He thinks himself and when himself his wants.
Yes.
Meeting himself, he thinks it's other than he.
So one problem about being a mental being is that we are open to all sides of a question. The animal with its instinct immediately knows what is good and bad for it and what it has to do. But man sees all sides of the question, the issue, and he turns to every call, whatever appeal or suggestion is there, and this is because he has no certain light by which to walk. In a way, instinct is a certain light, a sure light for the animal. But we need a higher light, and we haven't got it yet. So the mind has no certain light by which to walk. So our life is like a children's game. Blind man's buff. You know this game where somebody has a hood or a blindfold on, and the other children run around and touch him, and he has to grab somebody and still blindfold, identify who it is. And then that person who's been caught becomes the blind man. So this is blind man's buff. Buff means pushing or touching somebody. And then he says, a hide and seek. Somebody hides, all the others have to find. What he is seeking, what man is always seeking, is himself, the truth of his own being. But at the same time, he's running away, he's following all these other calls. He's not looking within, he's running away from himself.
Running away from himself? How is running away from himself?
Well, we're always turned outwards to these outer stimuli. This is what we are focused on. It's so difficult for us to focus inside and concentrate on our inner being. No? It seems as if we've even been made like that. No? One of the Upanishads says all the gates are turned outwards. No, that's why it's so difficult for us to look within. But when he does meet himself, meeting himself, the reflection of himself, the image of himself in the world, then he thinks, oh, that's not me, that's something outside me. Bhavan, please.
Always he builds, but finds no constant ground. Always he journeys, but nowhere arrives. He would guide the world, himself he cannot guide. He would save his soul, his life he cannot save.
So there's always some effort going on. Man is always building. But on what foundation shall he build? He doesn't find any firm, constant basis that he can always rely on. The mind is always shifting its basis. No? He feels that it's his mission to guide the world, but he cannot even guide himself. So that's why the world around us, as we see it today, is in such a mess. And he wishes, this word would here means he would like to, he wishes to, he wants to save his soul, but he's not able to save his life. He is subject to death, whatever happens. James.
The life his soul had brought, his mind has lost. All he has learned is soon again in doubt. A sun to him seems a shadow of his thoughts. Then all is shadow again, and nothing true. Unknowing what he does or whither he tends, he fabricates signs of the real in ignorance.
So when we come into the material world, our soul brings some light with it that would be a certain guide if we could hold on to it. But as the mind develops, we lose touch with that light of the soul that perhaps we had contact with when we were small children. And the mind learns. As we grow, we learn things. But everything that we learn and we think we know, before long, it's again in doubt. Some new theory comes up and tells us that, oh, that way you had of seeing and understanding, it's not true really. There's another perspective. So he's looking for a light, and he sees something that seems to be a sun to him, a guiding light. But it's just a projection, a shadow of his own thoughts. and soon that light fades and everything again is in shadow and nothing, he doesn't know what is true, what light to follow. He doesn't know what he's doing and he doesn't know where he's going. Last week we had the word whence, and this is the other one in the trio. Where, whence, whither. He doesn't know to where he's going, where he's tending, where are his steps leading him. He doesn't know that. And somehow with his mind he fabricates, he makes up or constructs signs of reality in this state of ignorance that he is in. Patricia.
He has hitched his mortal error to truth's star. Wisdom attracts him with her luminous masks, but never has he seen the face behind. A giant ignorance surrounds his lure.
There's a song, no, about hitching something to a star. You hitch your wagon to a star, exactly. That's a popular song of our childhood. And then we discover that this line was written in the 17th century by the poet John Donne. Hitch your wagon to a star. Means have some ideal to carry you along. So here Sri Aurobindo is taking up that image, and he says, man, whatever he's doing, although he's making mistakes all the time, he is somehow trying to connect himself to some light which he thinks is the truth. So he is attracted towards wisdom, but he only sees the masks, not the real being, the real wisdom behind. He sees the outside. He's never seen the face behind. And lore is what we think we have learned, the things that are passed down from generation to generation, that this is the way things are. No? So there may be some learning that is considered true, which is passed on, but it's surrounded by a great deal that we don't know. A giant ignorance surrounds his lore. Yuli.
Time to meet the cosmic mystery in the dawn figure of a material world. His passport of entry false and his personage. He is compelled to be what he is not. He obeys the impulsions he had come to rule and sings in matter to fulfill his soul.
So man, the mental being, has been assigned. He's been given this role. We are all here in a way because some command was given that it's time for mental beings to come down into the material world. When you're assigned a task, you're given a task, some responsibility, something that you have to do. So man has been assigned to meet the cosmic mystery. He's been given this task of meeting, of confronting the mystery of the universe in this form that we see it, this form of a material world. And here we are, we've come like kind of secret agents with false passports and false identities. His passport of entry, false. And his personage, the character that each of us is playing, it's not our true self. No? He's compelled to be, because we've come under this false identity and these false appearances, we're compelled to be what he is not really. It's interesting to know this, no? Yes. He has come to rule the inconscience, the world of matter. That's perhaps what we've been assigned to do. He sinks in matter to fulfill his soul. We've accepted this mission of coming into the material world, and we've found that we have to obey the rules of the material world, which we came with the intention of changing. So here we are, we have sunk in matter, we are dominated by matter, but the purpose that we've come for is to fulfill our souls. Mahalingam, you would read?
Awakened from her lower driven forms, the Earth Mother gave her forces to his hands and painfully begot a heavy trust. His mind is a lost torch-bearer on her roads.
So this mental being, humanity, is more awake. We've evolved, we're awakened beyond the lower driven forms, the forms that have no possibility of choice. Even with animals, I see my little cat, his range of choice is very small. He has very little possibility of bettering his life or his conditions or dealing with problems. He just has to accept them. He's driven by nature. Man is awakened a bit. And this is the instrument the Earth Mother has created and chosen to give her forces, to give us some measure of control over nature. And so, mankind, we have this responsibility, this heavy trust, this responsibility. But it's difficult for us to fulfill it. Painfully, he guards the heavy trust. We try to do the right thing, but we find it very, very difficult. So this mind here, mind under the domination of matter, dependent on a physical brain, it's a torch bearer, but it's lost its way. Lost its way on the roads of nature. Has no certain ground on which to build or to stand.
Illumining breath to think and clasp to feel. Her labors which wither. His slow and sceptic brain.
Skeptic brain, yeah.
Skeptic brain. Helped by the reason's vacillating fires. To make his thought and will a magic door. For knowledge to enter the darkness of the world, and love to rule a realm of strife and hate.
Thank you. So what are we doing? Illumining breath to think. Breath is the life force, the prana, the life energy. That has a way of consciousness of its own. But what the mind brings in is the possibility of thinking, planning, organizing. So this human being is illumining the breath to think, and plasm, this physical living substance, plasm, this feels, it can feel not only sensation but also emotion. Man is laboring with his slow and skeptic brain. It's hard work for us to think, to find out things, laboring. It's a hard effort because the brain is slow and it's skeptic, it doubts. Yeah. It's helped by the reason. That's actually the highest light we normally have in our mind. So the reason has a kind of fire that shows the way, but those fires are vacillating. They are wavering, and they're not always in the same place. They're giving different indications. But what in evolution does man represent? He's supposed to make his thought and his will a door, a magical door through which knowledge can enter the darkness, the unconsciousness of the material world, and to allow love to enter and eventually to rule this world, which is a realm, a kingdom, a domain of strife, of conflict and clash, and the very opposite or the distorted form of love, which is hate. So there's a purpose in this strange being ruled by this antinomy. This is his purpose. Joel.
A mind impotent to reconcile heaven and earth, and tied to matter with 1,000 bonds, he lifts himself to be a conscious God.
So we start as mental beings, mind. The mind is not able to bring a reconciliation or oneness between the higher levels of consciousness and matter. He's tied, or we are all tied to this matter that is our base with 1,000 bonds. In so many ways we can't move because we are tied to this material base, and still human beings are able individually to rise to the higher consciousness, escape from those bonds, and become consciously divine. Not many have done it yet, but still it is possible, it is done. Do you like to read one?
Even when a glory of wisdom crowns his brow, when mind and spirit shed a grandiose ray, to exalt this product of the sperm and gene, this alchemist's miracle from plasm and gas, and he who shared the animals run and crawl, lifts his thought stature to the immortal's heights. His life still keeps the human middle way. His body he resigns to death and pain, abandoning matter, his too heavy charge.
Thank you. So even in the most highly developed human beings, even when he's reached a glorious consciousness of wisdom, a glory of wisdom crowns his brow. And when his mind and spirit are shedding a wide, bright light, a grandiose ray, to lift up, to exalt, to raise higher this product of the sperm and the gene. That's, if we look at it from a biologist's point of view, that's what we are. We are products of sperms and genes. We are a miracle, an alchemist's miracle from plasm and gas. Plasm is the primitive form of matter, no? And gas. Somehow this has been turned into a living, conscious form. And he's risen above the animal. He who used to share, the animals run and crawl, is able to lift his thought stature that can become high enough to reach the heights of the immortals. The life still doesn't change. The life still keeps this human middle way between the heights and the depths. And he feels obliged, that he feels he can't escape, that his body he has to resign to death and pain. His thoughts may be free, in his consciousness he may be able to reach immortal heights, but he feels the body will always be subject to death and pain. So that has happened so often. These great beings have abandoned matter because it seemed too heavy a charge, something too difficult for them to handle. Changing matter. Even when we follow Sri Aurobindo and we know that that is what he has told us is the destiny, and that this is what has to happen. Still it seems something so difficult, so impossible. And of course, to us it is impossible. It needs that new power that he has brought to be able to do it, to change matter. So the mother is speaking at this point to Aswapati before there's any thought at all about the supermind, supramental, about the world as it was many centuries ago. Aswapati is presented as the first rishi who had the secret knowledge. So this is way back in history. And she says this is how it is. Shamana, please. You've got a difficult word here, a thaumaturge.
Skeptic of miracles, a spirit left sterile of its occult power by an unbelieving brain and credulous heart. He leaves the world to end where it began. His work unfinished, he claims a heavenly prize. Thus has he missed creation's absolute.
Thank you. A thaumaturge, it's somebody who can perform miracles. But he doesn't believe in miracles, and he doesn't believe in his own ability to perform miracles. There's a spirit which has that occult power, but it's made sterile. It's as if that occult power is stripped away from it because the brain doesn't believe and the heart is too credulous. It believes too easily in its own weakness and impotence. Credulous is somebody who believes, is ready to believe anything, with no discernment. So man leaves the world to end where it began. He doesn't really make any difference. His work is unfinished, but he wants to go to heaven, be rewarded. No? And by doing that, by leaving the creation, by claiming the heavenly prize, he misses the absolute meaning of creation. Lena.
Halfway he stops, the star of destiny, a vast and vain long-tried experiment, an usurped high conception, doubtfully done. The world's life falters on not seeing its goal, a zigzag towards unknown dangerous ground, ever repeating its habitual walk, ever retreating after march is long, and hardest victories without sure result, drawn endlessly and inconclusively.
So, if we think that escaping from the world is what we have to do, then we are stopping our star that we've hitched our wagon to, that's supposed to lead us to our goal. No? He stops it. And as a result, the world's life just goes on, falters on. If you're faltering, you're very weak, you are not sure where you should go. It doesn't see where it's going. The life of the world is a vast experiment, and it seems to be in vain. We've tried it again and again and again for such a long time, and it seems to be without result. It's a high conception, there's a great aspiration there, but the artist who has this conception hasn't been able to carry it out. It's been doubtfully done. It's ill-served. It hasn't found the instruments that it needed to be fulfilled. So there it is, the world's life is faltering on, not seeing its goal. And it takes this path of a zigzag, this way and that way and this way, heading towards unknown, dangerous ground. And it always repeats the same steps, and it always has to retreat, even when it's taken long marches, seems to have gone a great distance, even when it seems to have won daring victories, hardiest victories that required such a lot of courage and endurance. No? Still, there hasn't been any sure result or outcome. It only seems like an endless game of forces, and there's no one clear victor. The game is always drawn. Sometimes we hear Mother expressing this view of things in a very, very poignant way, of saying, it's always like that. Every victory, you always have to win it again and again and again.
In an ill-fitting and voluminous robe, a radiant purpose still conceals its face. A mighty blindness stumbles hoping on, feeding its strength on gifts of luminous chance.
So, there's this robe. It's a very voluminous robe, very large. It doesn't fit the wearer. It's far too big and large for the one who's wearing it. Within that robe which is the universe, a radiant purpose is still hiding its face. There is a purpose, there is an aim, there is a light. So because of that, this mighty blindness, which is nature, which is the universe, stumbles on, hoping, always hoping, feeding its strength on gifts of luminous chance. Every now and then, apparently by chance, something comes along to help. Rosa?
Because the human instrument has failed, their Godhead frustrates, sleeps within its seat, a spirit entangled in the forms it made.
So that's the universe, is a mighty blindness stumbles on. And the mother says that's because the human instrument has failed. The mental being, the race, humanity, hasn't been able yet to fulfill its purpose. And so that possibility of a divine being is still sleeping in its seed. It hasn't yet, it's frustrated, it's been prevented from sprouting, from achieving its growth. The spirit is still entangled in the forms that itself has made. But then she says something encouraging. She says, his failure is not failure whom God leads. Through all, the slow, mysterious march goes on. An immutable power has made this mutable world. A self-fulfilling transcendence treads man's road. The driver of the soul upon its path, it knows its steps, its way is inevitable, and how shall the end be vain when God is guide?
So question, God is guide?
God is guide, that's what she says. God is leading. She says an immutable power, a power that cannot change, has made this world that is always changing. And who is traveling this road as man? It's the traveler in time, it's the divine himself, no? A self-fulfilling transcendence, something that is beyond all the limitations. That self-fulfilling transcendence is treading man's road. That power is the one that is driving the soul upon its path, and it knows the steps. It's not stumbling. Its way is inevitable. So if God is the guide, how shall the end be vain when God is guide? We'll end on that hopeful note and go on next time. Shall we read? His spirit and his members are at war. His heights break off too low to reach the skies. His mass is buried in the animal mire. A strange antinomy is his nature's rule. A riddle of opposites is made his field. Freedom he asks, but needs to live in bonds. He has need of darkness to perceive some light, and need of grief to feel a little bliss. He has need of death to find a greater life. All sides he sees, and turns to every call. He has no certain light by which to walk. His life is a blind man's buff, a hide and seek. He seeks himself, and from himself he runs. Meeting himself, he thinks it other than he. Always he builds, but finds no constant ground. Always he journeys, but nowhere arrives. He would guide the world, himself he cannot guide. He would save his soul, his life he cannot save. The light his soul had brought, his mind has lost. All he has learned is soon again in doubt. A sun to him seems the shadow of his thoughts, then all is shadow again, and nothing true. Unknowing what he does, or whither he tends, he fabricates signs of the real in ignorance. He has hitched his mortal error to truth's star. Wisdom attracts him with her luminous masks, but never has he seen the face behind. A giant ignorance surrounds his law. Assigned to meet the cosmic mystery in the dumb figure of a material world. His passport of entry false, and his personage. He is compelled to be what he is not. He obeys the inconscience he had come to rule, and sinks in matter to fulfill his soul. Awakened from her lower driven forms, the Earth Mother gave her forces to his hands, and painfully he guards the heavy trust. His mind is a lost torch-bearer on her roads. Illumining breath to think and plasm to feel, he labors with his slow and skeptic brain, helped by the reason's vacillating fires, to make his thought and will a magic door for knowledge to enter the darkness of the world, and love to rule a realm of strife and hate. A mind impotent to reconcile heaven and earth, and tied to matter with 1,000 bonds, he lifts himself to be a conscious God. Even when a glory of wisdom crowns his brow, when mind and spirit shed a grandiose ray to exalt this product of the sperm and gene, this alchemist's miracle from plasm and gas, and he who shared the animal's run and crawl lifts his thought stature to the immortal's heights. His life still keeps the human middle way. His body he resigns to death and pain, abandoning matter, his too heavy charge. A thaumaturge, skeptic of miracles, a spirit left sterile of its occult power by an unbelieving brain and credulous heart, he leaves the world to end where it began. His work unfinished, he claims a heavenly prize. Thus has he missed creation's absolute. Halfway he stops his star of destiny. A vast and vain, long-tried experiment, an ill-served, high conception doubtfully done. The world's life falters on, not seeing its goal. A zigzag towards unknown dangerous ground, ever repeating its habitual walk, ever retreating after marches long and hardiest victories without sure result. Drawn endlessly, an inconclusive game. In an ill-fitting and voluminous robe, a radiant purpose still conceals its face. A mighty blindness stumbles hoping on, feeding its strength on gifts of luminous chance. Because the human instrument has failed, the Godhead frustrate sleeps within its seed, a spirit entangled in the forms it made. His failure is not failure whom God leads. Through all the slow, mysterious march goes on. An immutable power has made this mutable world. As self-fulfilling transcendence treads man's road. The driver of the soul upon its path, it knows its steps. Its way is inevitable. And how shall the end be vain when God is guide?